Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today we're going to do a little bit more of a dive back into some of the lore and cover another company in the Star Citizen universe, this one being the creators of this Genesis Starliner and now the new Hercules Starlifter line, that's being Crusader Industries. Now their founder was August Dunlop, who in his preteen years was a student who was doing pretty well and was actually chosen to be one of the people in Messer's parade on Angeli to wave the UEE flag as the Imperator passed by. Now, he wasn't actually all that far from the stadium where a rally was scheduled to be held when all of a sudden there was just a massive explosion orchestrated by Messer's own children in the stadium there. And that debris ended up being scattered all across the cities. Battles waged through the night, and by morning, Messer was dead, and his kids were now sitting as leaders of the regime at that point. Now, it was a turning point for the UEE as a whole, but also specifically for Dunlop. In that explosion, Dunlop lost his mother, and his father was just horribly injured, which caused August to have to drop out of school to try and take care of his dad medically and financially, which he ended up doing by joining up with cleanup crews to work on clearing out the debris around the city and earning a paycheck in that process. Though that was obviously not really destined to be a long-term endeavor, which also meant that they could no longer afford medical bills after that ended up ending, and his father ended up passing away, which left Dunlop on the streets and alone for about a year and a half. Now, he hasn't really done a lot of speaking about this point in his life, so we don't really know much more than that. But what we do know is that there was a non-profit on the planet known as Angeli's Angels who eventually got in touch with him and took him in. Now, that ended up kind of shaping Dunlop to a point to where this kind of became a passion for him, like helping other people. And later in the company's history, we find out that he still takes us to heart, being one of the largest corporate donors to NPOs around the empire. Dunlop has kind of worn that like a badge, saying what good are profits if they don't lead to progress, with that progress being the betterment of humankind. Later on, Dunlop ended up attending the University of Angeli through a scholarship that he ended up receiving, and kind of got into a situation where he got like a double major in business and political science. Now, he obviously despised the Messer regime after what happened to his family, and with his political science schooling behind him, he became a very firm anti-Messer activist. His intelligence and kind of natural charisma led him being able to get other people to join the cause and kind of rally on a lot of his ideas, and because of this, he ended up becoming a known kind of public person in just the eye of all the people that are out there as the organizer of numerous rallies. He was actually supposed to be attending a rally on Terra one day, but he ended up getting sick before his flight, so he wasn't able to actually get on his transport, but lucky for him, it actually exploded as it was leaving the planet. The government said that it was officially an accident, but Dunlop and many others ended up feeling that people that were political threats were actually being targeted for assassination. So, fearing for his well-being after this, other activists ended up kind of helping to smuggle Dunlop into Xi'an space, where he basically just laid low and waited for the right time to return, while kind of still working in the background. However, in 2792, there was a terraforming corporation that had close ties to the Messer regime, and they began terraforming the planet that was actually host to the life that they claimed was not sentient, but pretty soon after that, there ended up being footage that showed up on Spectrum that proved otherwise, that this was sentient life. And with this whole planet essentially wiped from existence, this was dubbed as the Massacre of Garon II, and was what ended up bringing Dunlop out of hiding. He actually enlisted a bunch of Xi'an who agreed with his stance, came back to Angeli, where he hosted massive protests that would end up turning the tides on the Messer regime, leading to their downfall within a matter of just weeks. Now, after the fall of the regime, Dunlop would move on to Earth, where he took up kind of positions posing government reforms, working with civil rights lobbyists and doing that type of work. And this is where he ended up that having good intentions and ideas really only goes so far in government, because if you don't have the proper financial backing, true changes are impossible to achieve. Now, he may not have liked it, but that realization ended up kind of pulling him back from the public into the private sector, where he could end up receiving more support. Now, during the regime change, they also ended up canceling numerous government programs, which ended up leading to a need for the UEE from certain types of providers, and having an extensive list of government contacts, Dunlop needed a company that he could use to receive one of those grants that he knew was going to be available. So what he needed now was a company that had potential but wasn't achieving to that yet, which he found in a company called Seraphim Systems. Seraphim was a producer of shuttles that was based out of Tram, with their main problem being production volume, but the quality of the shuttles was very high. Now, they were already kind of a small company, but they were losing out on more business based on production delays and customers not wanting to kind of wait for that fulfillment to come in. In addition to those production issues, Seraphim and other companies located here were actually also struggling because the local economy started to tank as well, specifically after some unsubstantiated claims by Measure about this planet kind of hurt Asura's reputation. So he ended up targeting investors and knew that based on that regime hurting this part of space through their awards, it would be helpful for the government to award contracts here to kind of regain face. So after the business plan was presented and investors were secured, it was presented to Seraphim's board of directors that ended up actually rejecting it over just one point, being the name. Dunlop didn't like the name Seraphim, but their board didn't want to actually change it because it has ties to their religion. So Dunlop spent time with the CEO and the board and some of their families talking about how much he wanted to make a difference through political action and eventually won over rights and ended up renaming the company Crusader Industries. The outgoing CEO actually helped to rally employees kind of with a note about their commitment to doing good and advocating for moral rights across the empire and how the name Crusader kind of played into that. So Crusader was officially incorporated in 2799, and this is when Dunlop became the CEO, starting to use the money that was collected to expand operations and production and landed that government contract 2 years later. They immediately became profitable as a result of that, and that was when their commitment to a significant portion of profits being used for charitable causes was put into place. And as growth continued, so was Dunlop's desire to give more. And if they were really going to be able to accomplish doing that, it would require that they get beyond the walls of government contracts and begin to establish civilian customers as well. So that would end up proving a little bit challenging due to a lot of different roadblocks, but Dunlop's warehouse manager, Axel Adamson, came to realize that one of their biggest issues was the reliance on other people's fleets to help transport supplies and their production models once that production had been completed. So Dunlop, accepting of that realization, saw that many large ship manufacturers had shut down their operations at that point, which left a gap in the market. And he said, if we could make shuttles, why not larger ships? They certainly had the know-how and the ability to do it. So he presented this idea to the board of directors, which took years of opposition and debates to get approved, but eventually it ended up happening, allowing Dunlop to recruit some of the top minds and engineers to help make this a reality. And in 2812, that marked the first production model of their first carrier, known as the Jupiter, which would be used to deliver their shuttles to the customers, kind of in expanding their market reach a little bit. As people started to see the success of the Jupiter, though, there was actually a desire for consumer sales as well, and orders started to come in. There were actually so many sales orders that Dunlop again had to filter more money into production to keep those orders being fulfilled. Now, getting based, just a government contract, the Army even just decided that they were going to want to use the Jupiter class, to kind of transport vehicles to the front lines. And through all of this, though, Dunlop's happiest piece was that he saw a large number of these Jupiter crafts actually being used to bring aid around the systems that needed it most, and to honor his past, Crusader became, and still is, the largest contributor to the Angalia Angels. Now, Dunlop had been CEO for almost 8 decades at this point, finally retiring in 2876, and ended up focusing his remaining years on doing charitable work. Now, following Dunlop, there was a number of CEOs that stepped in, all promising to keep his vision of doing the right thing, though not all of them were truly really able to live up to the task either. In 2905, though, Kelly Kaplan was named the new CEO, which was a bit of a surprise with not a lot of business training. However, she was a ship designer by trade, and actually was one of the designers on the well-known Starliner, the Genesis Starliner. And based on her reputation in the company being really solid, as the reviews of the Genesis were incredibly favorable, it made her transition in a little bit easier. Now, her visions for the company, though, were startling to some, capped a little bit when she proposed to the board of directors that she wanted the company to actually buy a planet and the moons in the Stanton system. Now, the planet was a low-mass gas giant, and she felt that a series of floating platforms would be the best way to actually build these massive ships. Turns out, she was right, but it was still kind of a crazy idea either way. Now, after gaining approval, they started production there and ended up saving 40% on their production costs. Now, some of those savings were passed on to the customer, which also probably led to more orders, but she did also follow in Dunlop's steps and increase support to charities. Kaplan helped to garner respect for the company and helped it in its overall growth. However, she did have some issues that kind of were sticking to her in the public eye as well. One of those was because she was trying to recruit other companies to start production on their moons. However, that would end up being too costly and frankly difficult to accomplish, so it kind of made people wonder about her intentions there. Additionally, Crusader has really kind of appeared to not be able to really accurately track their crime stats correctly, which they were able to kind of clear up and help to fix some of their processes, but the company has not done what it really needs to do to protect the sheer size of this planet and 3 moons. Overall, though, the company is still one of the largest donors to charitable organizations in human space, and the benefits it has made to life in the Empire can't really be measured, but it's clearly very high. The company's been around for almost 150 years, mostly driven by good leadership, good values, and flexibility. So that's the history of Crusader. Kind of interesting to learn a little bit more about a company that was surely going to play a big part in this part of the universe that we're currently living in. So if you guys have questions on any of this, please let me know. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys watching. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and take care.